Alrighty. Okay, let me do this. All right. Good evening. It's another Wednesday, and that means it's another episode of Awoken with Aulden. Awoken Wednesdays, right? Okay, so wanting to cover a couple things, we're mostly going to be doing a little bit of history about the Middle East and foreign policy related to it in 2002 and onwards. Wanted to take a second to thank you for listening and watching this channel and all they do. And please share this with your friends and family, coworkers, etc. Crush that follow button. Please subscribe to the channel. Hoping to get all the support I can as we continue on this journey to unlock minds and wake up our beautiful nation. Let's get this guy. Okay, that's going to have to do. But yes, just wanting, thank you again, wanting to jump right into things. So a little background before I start the presentation is we're looking at, so you have 9/11, right? You know, world-changing, nation-changing historical event that altered the course of U.S. history in immediate, long and short term. Effects, consequences, political realities, worldwide realities were met. And, seen as us being the world's empire, we can't not do anything. There has to be some kind of response regardless. So, and let's go to the slides now. Okay, so 2002, George Bush, given the State of the Union, it's like, all right, axis of evil is Iraq with Saddam Hussein, North Korea, Kim Jong-un, Iran with Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Right. So you have these three different countries, three regimes, three different leaders. What's going to happen? Okay, so today we've gathered the three leaders of these regimes, and we're going to play a game. Price is Right, right? The axis of evil, Price is Right. And basically, they're all going to have the same choice. And so they've been listed on this list, this axis of evil. They're freaking out, right? Like, okay, democracy is going to be heading our way at any moment, next couple months, years, short period of time. And they're like, okay, do we try for the nuke or not? So first, let's start with Iraq. In the 90s, what happened? They invade Kuwait, worldwide, condemnation rather, excuse me. And there's sanctions, etc. And during the 90s, I believe until mid to late 98, there were inspections. IAEA, other groups come in and finds that there's no wrongdoing, nothing going on, no chemical weapons, no weapons of mass destruction, at least at the time. Right, yeah. So now let's go to November 2002, or actually take a step back. So go to like 98. The inspections are, they quit occurring in 98. So you have this 4 or 5 year period of where they're not cooperating. We don't really know what's going on. And, well, why might this guy be on that axis of evil? Well, we've dealt with Saddam before. We know in the 1980 through 1988 Iran-Iraq war that Saddam and his regime used chemical weapons during this, right? So we know that they're capable, or at least are willing. Yeah, Saddam is willing to go there. maybe he is again, maybe he isn't, right? Maybe he's not. But we know, at least through history, that he is willing to, yeah, escalate the warfare, right? And so, UN Resolution 1441, that's passed in the UN Security Council, 15-0 vote, unanimous. And it's basically saying, hey, this is your last warning. You need to allow inspectors back in immediately, kind of deal. So November, I believe, of 2002 through March of 2003, inspections return. But then later in March 2003, the invasion begins. So ultimately, we know, even if you say, hey, we're not, you allow the inspections for 8 years, nothing's going on. And if the inspections discontinue, they cease to exist. That kind of gets you on the radar for the West. Does not approve of that by any means. And after the regime collapsed, there were no nuclear stockpile or weapons of mass destruction stockpile found, right? So that damaged credibility. And by 2006, 2007, the war grows incredibly unpopular from U.S. public support and opinion. And now, after 06, 07, the surge, right? After that, you have a couple years of ISIS majority rule, but now it's really a failed state and a vassal state for the Iranians, right? There's Shiite militias that are stationed in Iraq that help their influence over the region. Iranian influence is, I'd say, a majority of all the influence in the, it's a regional neighbor. They're right next to each other. So it helps the Iranians to have this like this. So Saddam chose curtain number one, was wishy-washy with inspections. Ultimately, the United States vote, he couldn't be trusted. So curtain number one led to regime upheaval. All right, the regime is not around today. It's a vassal state for the Iranians. So Kim Jong-un and the North Koreans, it's their turn to pick. They pick curtain number two. Okay, and they just saw what happened. So they're not going to be like, hey, we're just going to, give up entirely or surrender everything. We know what the result of that is. Or even sometimes complying with it. So if our regime is going to make it, we're going to need a rush for the nuke. And they do that and they succeed in this, right? Very simply, we didn't bomb their nuclear facilities back in June, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's a guarantor of regime survival. That's at least what the North Koreans calculated. And just a quick little timeline with that. So in the 1980s, their first, little nuclear plant, nuclear facility formed up. And they threatened to leave the NBT. It forces US to come to the table. There's some sanction relief, but they publicly discontinue plutonium enrichment, right? But they never fully agreed to shut everything down or discontinue their program necessarily. And in 2002, the U.S. confronts them, say, hey, we know you're doing this underground secret nuclear program. You need to, share all of your information, all of your deepest secrets about it. And well, the North Koreans kind of give the finger and they leave the NPT, the first nation, I believe, to ever do so, the non-proliferation treaty for nuclear development, enrichment, and advancement. Okay. And then a couple years after that, in '06, their first nuclear test. It gives a pinpoint to the world that, hey, we continued our program, even being isolated internationally. They still prove, hey, if we just lock in for a couple years and do this really quickly and keep it secret enough to where, all right, they might have some piece of the puzzle over here for this and maybe some over here, but not enough to connect everything together. And ultimately, they're able to test in 2006, their first one. I believe they do a second one in 2009, again in 2013, the third test. So now it's becoming routine, and they're kind of seen on the world stage as, this nuclear powerhouse now, right? They were able to do it and get the bomb. Okay, 16, 17, they test 4, 5, and 6. Now they're in the game for real. That's like the black belt. They've graduated. They're globally recognized now as this power, and they can't really be touched anymore. Their biggest threats are like, whether it's internal regime survival, and that would mean like everyone is starving, no one can, society doesn't function at all. And just think about, you saw the Chinese military parade a few weeks ago. Kim Un, he doesn't leave the nation. Pyongyang, I believe, is the pronunciation of the capital of North Korea. Doesn't leave there often. Took a 20-hour train ride, go Beijing to meet with Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping for this military parade, right? So he's expanding a little bit with with 2 other nuclear powerhouses and allies, right? So he realizes they can't stay around forever, totally internationally isolated, but there's help out there for them. And look, when's the last, we don't really mess with them, right? They have the bomb now. We don't really, they're always a threat, in general, but it's not like, it doesn't feel like there's a 5-alarm fire that's kind of going off right now about them, more or less, if that makes sense. So, they're still treated seriously, but curtain number 2 yielded that if you're able to get the bomb, the regime is fine, more or less, as long as you can show that, you're effective in it. And that's pretty much the golden ticket, and we've even seen like, during this president's first term back in 17 through 21, he, met multiple times with the supreme leader of North Korea. We're the US. We can talk to whoever the F we desire. And we can, if we want to that bad, we can get a meeting. That's the advantage of being the top dog on the world, is that even look at the Al-Qaeda guy from Syria, new leader of Syria, commander, helped Al-Qaeda, and now he's, red carpet rolled out the White House for Al-Qaeda. So, we're the US. So don't ever think that we're not allowed to talk to these people or, have discussions with them because of any reason. Here, excuse me, I did kind of get into tangent. So let's just for the slide, the visual purpose. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil. What do all 3 of those nations have in common so far? That, just even describing North Korea and Iraq, haven't even really gone to Iran yet. Western aligned, right? They all more or less kind of work together a little bit, maybe with a shared vision to defeat Western civilization or something of that nature. The support, whether it's supporting terrorism through like proxies or supplying other nations with cash or something. That kind of groups the three of them together. But three of them combined did not have, were involved in 9/11 though. Okay, so yeah, as I kind of mentioned, Saddam gets current number one, Kim gets current number two, and the supreme leader gets current number three. The game begins. Yeah, so again, Iraq does not pursue, the nuclear weapon. Nothing is found after the regime fell, gets overthrown, right? So Kim Jong-un sees this. Hey, he's like, hey, we have to get the bomb. Gets the bomb, and the regime is totally fine. There's still, what's the proper isolation through sanctions and, the population more or less lives in like a darkness of the media, right? The state media we know rules. The regime propaganda is strong. So after seeing this now, it's Ali Khamenei's turn to, hey, he's got turn number three. It's his turn to see what's on the other side of it. And he kind of chose a mixture of the both. So here's where we really get into Iran. So he sees Saddam go down in 2003 and sees Kim elevate, in the late 2000s or early 2010s. And he knows that, yeah, geographically, it's where he is and the nation is in the Middle East conflict has huge ramifications. Neighbors with Iraq. It's proxies in Yemen and Lebanon. They need to be able to get these guys supplies and ammunition and other resources. So Iran plays a huge role in the conflict. And well, you may ask, well, why did Iran not try and stop Iraq from being overthrown? If they're neighbors, if they're right next to each other, if they're both anti-Western generally. Well, so the supreme leader, Shiite Muslim majority. That's Iran. It's a theocracy. There are only about 15% of Muslims of the Muslim population in the world. Shiites are, but they're aggressive. They're not going to stop it. I know that's a simple way of explaining it, but they're just not really going to stop anytime soon. And Saddam, even though Iraq is also more Shiite, the government was Sunni Muslim. The other 85% of worldwide Muslims are Sunni Muslims. Okay. So even though it was an anti-Western nation that went down, a rising tide lifts all boats. So it was also a enemy of Iran to go down, right? They had the 1980 through 1988 Iran-Iraq war. The supreme leader was not sad at all to see Saddam go away with this. So he kind of picks the middle, right? And it's in 2002, the first nuclear facilities, they were exposed. He kind of had, they were doing it in secret, which is a violation of the NPT signed by the Shah, I believe, in 1968, I think. And so it's a lie. They got caught red-handed with this, honestly, and now they're kind of like being caught by the police for something. Now they got to sit at the table and make some concessions. What's the sentence, the punishment going to be? And they're in a state to where, they're forced with this diplomacy and discussion. They want to hang on to the 1979 Iranian, the flame of the Iranian Revolution. Right? Hey, anything before this, we don't really give all that much credence to because we overthrew the regime. This is us. Now we're the top dogs in charge over the Persians. And so, they discuss for a couple years, but ultimately sanctions are brought onto the nation, cripples the economy, oil sanctions, exports by the United States slowed down significantly. And this kind of goes on for a little less than a decade, honestly. And during this time from '06 to 2015, they, again in secret or in private, start enriching, at a higher rate, enriching uranium a little bit higher. So 2015, JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, I believe it's called, big development in you've probably heard of this before. It's more commonly referred to as the Iranian nuclear deal. 2015, it's signed. Obama signs it along with the other, major EU power players. Iran signs it. And for a couple years, there's no problems, really. Confirmed repeatedly through multiple inspections from the IAEA, Iran is not violating the deal. And sanctions, as a result, are lifted. The Iranian economy is able to grow a little bit, to expand. They're able to strengthen. But then in 2018, the United States pulls out of the deal. Says no longer, we're not going to work with it or whatever. And well, what's this do? It shows the supreme leader, hey, all right, we've complied. We just saw we saw 20 years ago what happened with Saddam. And, if we just give up the program, even if we comply, it doesn't really matter. If that kind of makes sense, right? So we need to, whether it's underground or whatever, we need to up enrichment again, go even higher now, this time. So what's the result of this? Sabotage, proxy conflicts, nuclear facilities bombed, civilian nuclear scientists assassinated, IRGC commanders and leaders picked off. After 18, it starts to get really serious. That's the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, January 3rd, 2020. One of the biggest things to really happen ever in this conflict, right? Soleimani oversaw the expansion of the axis of the proxy network, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, Palestine, and the Houthis in Yemen, by the Red Sea. And with him gone, that makes it, okay, now, it doesn't matter what we do, they're going to come after us. So next couple years, they, the sanctions return. It's getting really tough right now. And they increase enrichment, and they start reducing cooperation with the IAEA as a result. Now, as many air inspectors are allowed in, not at, the proper locations necessarily. And then this cultivates all the way, or cultivates rather, all the way up to what happened in June, the Operation Midnight Hammer, the U.S. strikes in Natanz, Esfahan, and Fordo. The bunker buster bombers from the B-2 craft, the aircraft. And it really, so here's what happens after that. Let's get this off. Yeah. So even with the best intel, we can't be 1,000% certain of what really happened that day, right? We can assume that the program was set back at least some period of time. It at least kicked the can down the road for an unknown period of time that is less than 5 years. It didn't totally destroy it. We know that because the IAEA, Iran totally cut ties with IAEA back in September of this year. The supreme leader says they're already back up at 60% enrichment. So, excuse me for that belch there. But so, yeah, they're done with the IAEA. They've cut ties with them. The EU instituted the snapback sanctions from the JCPOA. More sanctions are on Iran. Right now, they're going through a massive drought of water. It's not raining. It's hot. There's blackouts in the nation, multiple hours a day. Sometimes the everyday Iranian, water is not accessible at large rates that's needed. And so society is kind of at a little bit of a breaking point a little bit there. It's not a stadium pulse 10 by any means, but it's growing too, right? And they still don't have the bomb, right? Now we know through reporting through the New York Times, I believe it's not Operation, but like Mountain Pickaxe or something like that. And they may have already that was either a hidden nuclear you just found or not destroyed or attacked in the June raids. And so we have to assume that not everything was destroyed and that they're probably upping enrichment again. Okay. So, but as of now, the regime is still intact, even though it's damaged, crippled, weakened. They're still around because of that. And yeah, there's no more IAEA talks. He said they will not talk to the USA or risk sacrificing national security. That's what they see it as. So that's kind of the big deal with them, right? So they're still, he took the middle. And as of now, they're still around, but that doesn't mean forever. So yeah, Iraq fell, North Korea endured, and Iran has more or less adapted so far to what's going on. And the regime has survived. The IRGC has seen a major increase in influence under Khamenei than under Ruhollah Khomeini, the first supreme leader of the Islamic Republic. So they have been forced to kind of get the protection a nuclear weapon would provide in other ways, through the proxy network, through the IRGC, through their missile defense system, through the nuclear hedge enrichment. If they're ever like, all right, we think they're coming in a few weeks, right? Now the stadium pulse is at a 10. They're at a spot to where they can quickly, if in the case of an emergency, break out and develop it. Yeah, I believe that's the last guy there. Let's go back here. Oh, wait. Sam. Wait, so were you guys able to see any of those slides at all? Yeah, that's not good. That means I just talked into the black screen for like 15 minutes. What's T Wayne 67? Okay, so yeah, T Wayne alerted. Screen is black, no slides. WMD, more like asses of evil. What about the hemp bill? The screen is all black. Why can't we see a background? Am I evil? Yes. Aulden, can we see slides or a background or something? Okay, so what I'll do is, if no one was able to see the presentation, I'll put it on Twitter. I'll put a link to the slide so you can see it yourself, and maybe you can have it. You can go back and listen and kind of click the slides as you go, or maybe there was a verbal cue I mentioned while verbally describing the contents of the internet presentation provided for you. Okay, yeah, it says now I'm back on. So I don't know why it did not. Yeah, that is quite disappointing that the slides were not showing. Okay, so yeah, I'll put the slides on Twitter and on the Facebook page or whatever. I think I can even put a link on the YouTube. Like the comment section or whatever. So yeah, I will do that. I don't know why it still blacks out sometimes. Like, let me get. It's just frustrating a little bit. Okay, so here, I'm gonna try this again. Yeah, it just goes black, doesn't it? Shoot, man. Let's see if that did anything. Okay, so now here it is. See, that's what's a little frustrating with that. Maybe I can just kind of speed run it a little bit. Again. There we go. Okay. All right, tremendous. Okay. So I will quickly just kind of redo the presentation. Sorry if you're just joining or we're not able to see that. Okay, so just real briefly, the so yeah, 9/11 occurs. You got these three regimes that are listed by the President Bush as the axis of evil, and what does that really mean, right? What all three do they have in common? Well, we at least suspect that they I are either currently pursuing a nuclear weapon, uh, maybe have one, or or maybe on the perspective doing that. Yo, tremendous, yeah. Got a decent little crowd tonight. Again, very. Thank you for tuning in to this episode and learning a little bit each time. Okay, so let's go to the next guy here. All right, tremendous. So yeah, uh, 9/11 happens. The next year, State of the Union president uses the rally around the flag effect, and it's time to potentially go after some of these people on the axis, or these nations within the axis of evil. So yeah, right. The game begins, and so Saddam, current number one. What's that mean? That means he's going to go down. right? So if you were here before, I mentioned the 1980 through 88 Iran-Iraq War. Saddam used chemical weapons against the Iranians, and it's really not seen as uh, there's at least some historical context to say, hey, Saddam is potential, and we know he's willing to go using above maybe standard war weapons, right? To go a little further on that unethical, mass destruction pathway. So he's too big of a threat, and he's got to get out. And so, after the invasion of Kuwait in the 90s, they comply with sanctions. They listen. The inspectors come in. No problems are found. And yeah, so 98 comes around, and Iraq is saying, okay, yeah, we're done with this now. There's going to be no more inspections until November of 2002. That comes after the UN Security Council Resolution 1441. That basically is a last, when your mom is mad at you and she says, I'm counting to three, and she's about to say three. This is kind of what they were doing, right? So you better allow inspections in right now or you're toast. And they did, for a couple months there were inspections. Ultimately, the regime was invaded in March of 2003. It's overthrown very shortly after, and they're done. Yeah. There's a civil war that breaks out. The surge occurs. ISIS, develops through that power vacuum. And ultimately, it's a failed vassal state now for Iran. That's all it is. That's, corruption riddles the country all over. Not much legitimacy at all with it. Okay. So let's go to the next nation, North Korea. You got Kim. Kim, he's there now. They're they see what just happens after Saddam chose curtain number one. It's time for them to go in and invade. Or excuse me, time to go in all in rather for the nuclear weapon. There's talks for a little while. Ultimately, they still in secret are pushing enrichment, upping enrichment levels. And by 2006, they have the first nuclear test occurs. And the first nuclear test occurs a few years after that. The second one happens in 2009. There's another one in 2013. And then, through 16 and 17, test number 4, 5, and 6 occur with capabilities that could reach U.S. soil. So now it's, they're seen as this massive nuclear powerhouse, treated much differently on the national stage. We don't try regime change over there for a reason. Now, current number 3, what happens? So the Supreme Leader of Iran sees what happens when you go all for it and you don't comply. 2 different results. So he understands that just the conflict on the Middle East in general is, he's in the heart of it. It's a huge geographical advantage, and it's a big spot on the board that the good guys and the bad guys both want. Just breaking it down very simply there. And so what are they going to do? Well, so their first sites are discovered by dissenters, or exposed rather by Iranian dissenters in 2002. And now they're kind of forced to come to the table, say, all right, we got caught red-handed. Now we're going to the uh, goodness gracious. Yeah. Now we have to come to the table and kind of talk things out a little bit because violated the NPT, which the Shah, before this current regime even took power, got Iran into. So after a couple years of negotiation in 06, sanctions, excuse me, not 06, actually maybe 06, with Iran, I believe. Yeah, the sanctions begin, the economy starts to falter, slither down a little bit in the sense that it's unable to diversify. It's an old infrastructure. They have an old failing infrastructure. Uh, so you've seen it through the water crisis, and the drought that they're going through currently is not helping them. Iranian society is kind of boiling a little bit there. But now in 2015, Barack Obama says, hey, let's make a deal. Kind of like the show. And they do, right? The joint comprehensive plan of action is put into place. The major players in the EU come to the table also. And it's an agreement to where, hey, we'll remove the sanctions if you allow inspectors back in. And they do that, right? IAEA repeatedly, several times, confirms that there's nothing nefarious happening at these nuclear sites and that they're complying with the deal. That's kind of it. 2018, the United States under President Trump withdraws from the agreement. And now that's where sabotage and the survival instinct kind of comes in, because what else happens in 18? The IRGC, the parallel military apparatus for the regime, is now classified as a terrorist organization that allows for additional sanctions and sabotage against them. The the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, January 3rd of 2020, occurs. So what happened? Iran, they're almost forced to increase enrichment and kind of go not all in necessarily, but they need to be stronger because you can't not do anything or Iraq happens. They know they can't go too fast. They almost have to move at a medium fast speed. Almost. Yeah, they can't go too fast or they're going to be attacked. Or if they go too slow, then the regime will just crumble over time. So they still have to pursue without it really being an active pursuit. And so what happens in June of 2025, the United States bombs Fordo, Isfahan, and Natanz nuclear facilities within Iran. A lot of these are kind of northeastern region of the republic. But we can't say one way or another with 1,000% certainty that everything was destroyed or that they didn't move stuff out of there before the attacks or something else occurred or happened. And in September 25, they completely abandoned any discussions with the IAEA. The Supreme Leader has said multiple times that they're already right back up at 60%, and that they will not even have any discussion with the United States anymore because they consider it national security. So it seems like now they're kind of going in the path of curtain number 2 of like all out enrichment a little bit. We'll just have to see, because the regime and the government is still weak. They need to continue to smuggle, black oil or black market their oil to China. And because China, they have no oil, right? That's their biggest disadvantage, is that they don't have any. They always, have to import. They have their Belt Road Initiative, so they need Iran, right? Uh, so yeah, this gives Iran time to really think about what they want. Not a whole lot of time, but it gives them leverage a little bit. If they feel like an attack is imminent, they can break out really quickly, right? Maybe within that 2-week time period or something. But yeah, Iraq fell, North Korea endured, and Iran is surviving. That's pretty much what it is right now. So that's what happened after the immediate result of those three nations after President Bush labeled them of evil. Okay, so that's with that. I do want to. So let's. Now this is new information. So I just kind of redid the presentation real quick because the guy was this black, or the screen was all black rather. Here, let's make sure everything's okay. Great. Yeah, I turned my phone on, do not disturb. So like, yeah, the messages don't ping on the computer, mess things up. And that did prevent me from some fans texting in, alerting me of the issue. But you know what? That's going to happen. This is what, the fifth, sixth time I've came to you live. But I do want to show you something reported in Fox, actually. To make sure that I can be seen. Real quickly. Then I'll keep talking. Okay, great. Okay, so this was reported a few days ago. I didn't think got that much attention because let's do a quick little quick little recap, last couple years almost, of what's really happened. And so we talked about once the JCPOA, we pulled it, it was more or less toast. And the escalation with Iran it keeps getting the temperature keeps raising a little bit more and more each year. And so without a nuclear weapon, what can Iran do to ensure regime survival for now? One of the things that they invested in that Iraq, or North Korea for that matter, didn't and does not or will never have, is an extensive proxy network. Hezbollah in Lebanon, these guys. Hamas within Palestine and Gaza, and the Houthis and, right by the Red Sea in Yemen, controls trade routes. There's militias in Syria and Iraq that fight on their behalf also. What are some other advantages that ensures regime survival? Well, they control 20% of the global oil flow, the Strait of Hormuz. They have 40% of China's oil flow through that 20%, right? They hold a major card to screw up global oil immediately if they want to. What else do they have? A big missile system. Their missile system projects and allows them to defend themselves more. That's from airstrikes and attacks like that. So here, let's go back to this article. And so something about Syria, I mentioned earlier in the broadcast about how the Al Qaeda guy is now in the invited to the White House at the UN. And basically the U.S. said, hey, we will look the other way about the stuff you've done in the past. well, you got to help us out here a little bit, and we need your help in closing this bridge that Iran, the Syria land bridge that gets to southern Lebanon and Lebanon as a whole. So Iran can't keep arming Hezbollah because, especially after the pager attack, I'm sure you remember that last year, and the leadership was decapitated. The guy uh, had been the leader of Hezbollah for like 20, 30 years, a long time. And so that's a big leadership change. Here, let's keep going here. Yeah, to the proxy, Hezbollah and Lebanon, despite all the sanctions. And the Lebanese parliament, has voted to disarm Hezbollah. So they're kind of getting squeezed that way also. They're losing the leadership. Their sanctions, attack, that the pager attack, they're kind of getting squeezed also. And without the Syria land bridge, makes it that much harder, squeezes them even more. And what this also does show is that Iran is not giving up and they're playing the long game still. That they need the proxy network to remain intact, or they know that if they don't have that regional influence outside of their border, it makes it a lot harder for them, for projections. Even with everything Iran has been through, even with the economy not in great shape, they're still pumping a lot of money to their terrorist proxies. The key to that is to drive out the Iranian influence and control. That starts with all the money they're pumping into Hezbollah. Pressure campaign, Turkey, Lebanon, UAE. Oh, excuse me. It was a campaign tour. Yeah, so basically what I've been saying. Yeah, the West, Europe and the United States have already done the snapback sanctions from the JCPOA, and they're not going to talk. Yeah, Midnight Hammer. Iran had nevertheless continued its efforts to spread chaos across the globe, U.S. officials say. Along with Israel and Mexico's, or U.S. officials, along with Israel and Mexico, thwarted an Iran-backed attempt to assassinate Israel's ambassador to Mexico earlier this year. What else is? Yeah, the Israeli and security intelligence community will continue to work tirelessly in full cooperation with security and intelligence agencies around the world to thwart terrorist threats from Iran and its proxies against Israel and Jewish targets worldwide. The U.S. official told Reuters the plot targeting Ambassador Kranz was contained and does not pose a current threat. Let's go back to this. Yeah, so that's just something to really that is still happening every day, right? The Houthis are, their prime minister was picked off a few months ago in a bombing. The remaining political leadership of Hamas almost died the day before Charlie Kirk was assassinated. People forget about that. The day before Charlie Kirk died, Israel bombed Qatar. And the remaining political leadership of Hamas was there to discuss the peace plan put forward or introduced by the president. The bomb, it ultimately didn't work out. But it goes to show that this is very every day something could happen with this. Even though not talking about Iran necessarily as a whole, but even with this 20-point peace plan, it's still it's more of a strategic pause than a final solution, rather, because what does it not cover? It doesn't cover the root conflict or conflicts or causes of the conflict, and it doesn't have a long term or short term uh, ava- not availability, but solution or uh, resolving the question of if there's going to be a Palestinian state or not. It did not uh, discuss a timeline of Hamas being, the disarmament there. So uh, there's stuff like this. It's going to be occurring daily. And now that I've kind of broken the ice a little bit with the Middle East conflict, giving you a little bit of history about a regime change in a couple countries now, uh, we are not out of the woods with Iran yet. So keep the eye on the prize with that. That's what I would say when it comes to the Iranian conflict. Okay, so let's, yeah, going to, unless if anyone has any uh, questions, anything, I think that's really the main thing I wanted to discuss this week with you. Okay. Yeah, again, hate that the screen was black during the first time I discussed all of that. Because we probably could have been done a little earlier. Great job, very informative. Thank you, T. Wayne. Yeah, my unk. Got my unk on here. Let's go, T. Wayne. Sam Weatherald. I don't know who that is. Sam Weatherald. Yeah. Huh. I love you. Oh, I love you too, T. Wayne. But yeah, so that's a major. So that's just kind of a little crash course of, yeah, some recent regime change policy ideas. Maybe there's a way I can go back and insert the slides when I'm talking about it the first time. Maybe, I don't know. We will have to. Uh, that's for another time for a later date. Probably not. Yeah, probably not going to do a show tomorrow. Probably, yeah, next week is when we'll do the next one. Uh, but yeah, so I think I'm gonna end things there, unless if anyone else has anything going on in the next few seconds when I close out. But I would love to say thank you very much for watching. You have been awoken with Aulden. I will see you next week. Keep please again share. Share the channel, the page, retweet the stuff, share it. Was there? Okay, here we go. Was there any dialogue between Qatar and Israel? So, hmm, yeah. So, like, in the grand scheme of things, Qatar is this mediator when it comes to the conflict. They have. It's almost like if you got a buddy, your buddy and uh, his chick are beefing or something, and you're like a third wheel on it. Both parties will come to you to relay the information that they kind of want you to say to the other person. So they're a great mediator in the sense that they talk with Israel and uh, Iran, and that's what gives Qatar leverage too. Is that they know that they they have connections with both Iran and Israel, and they will exploit them to whether to their gain. So yes, they talk with both nations, and now on terms of the day that of the attack, that is more unclear in the sense that did Israel let them know that they were going to bomb? Maybe uh, even with what the White House has said, it seems to be unclear that the United States, if they were told in time for anything to be worth, for it to be worth anything at all. So, uh, I saw some reporting that Turkey might have been the that let the leadership of Hamas know what's going on, and that's why they were able to survive the bombing. So, yeah, very good question though, because as we expand the Middle East more, what is the situation in Yemen? Okay, great. Yeah, another great question. So in Yemen, I know there's a civil war going on there, and the big thing with them, and again, it's kind of Shiite versus Sunni. That's going to be a common theme in the Middle East. Are that like because it is a other than Israel, there's really not a major presence of other, yeah, ethnic groups or religious groups or other, yeah, differing groups of people. It is 95% or more, even probably Islam majority, more or less. So that's a conflict between themselves over there. But what the Houthis, them being in charge, maybe not officially in charge, but having at kind of like Hezbollah in Lebanon, having at least somewhat of a majority stake, is that they have their own institutions, they have their own uh, ways and means of operations, and it can disrupt trade going to Israel through the Red Sea right there. So that's a good question about Yemen. Yeah, excellent question, Unk. But yeah, they're the prime minister of the Houthis of their own. Uh, because that's the thing, Hezbollah and the Houthis, even though they are terrorist oriented, they are also a political party in the nation itself, right? They have seats in the cabinets and influence politically. They can, yeah, you know what I mean. So like, it's not uh, entirely just a rogue group. They have, yeah, there is a political element when it comes to them. So they have their own government, their own people doing their own things. So yeah, great question. Okay, yeah, going to check a couple more things, but yeah, I think I pretty well got all I wanted. But we will continue. Yeah, thank you. Good night. Yeah, thank you, T Wayne. Wonderful questions today, Unk. Okay, so you're yeah, as we that was kind of like a little bit Middle East 101, not wanting to get into the super sensitive topics today, but we will get into them in the near future, right? Because I do think Middle East is one of the coolest uh, yeah, shouldn't say like, oh, but it's fascinating and interesting to study and learn about because it, yeah, legit goes all the way back to, uh, beginning of everything, right? It's uh, the Persians, right? Uh, Cyrus the Great, the first king of Persia, such a long history of Iran, Shahs, bad regimes, dynasties overthrown, uh, theocracy implemented, right? There's just so much going on, and that's just one of the nations, right? You have the Saudis, you have, uh, yeah, the conflict in Lebanon, Yemen, the Abraham Accords, yeah, just everything, everything kind of ties into uh, everything a little bit there. So yeah, we'll definitely go more into that. Hopefully, not sure what we're going to talk about next time yet. We'll kind of keep track of current events, maybe have a little bit of that. But this week, yeah, was the main. I did want to get to that. This kind of get everyone seasoned for the conflict, for the Middle East and Northern Africa as well, to the Horn of Africa, Libya, more north, central north. There's a lot of fun stuff to learn and discuss here. So, okay. Well, I am going to, unless if anyone has anything before I sign off, I will call it here. Again, sorry for the black screen. If you were listening earlier in the broadcast, yeah, that'll figure it out. Again, I'll post the slides on the pages once we conclude here. Again, so thank you very much for watching tonight's episode of Awoken with Aulden. Please share and press repeatedly that follow button. Drop a subscription, leave a retweet, follow all the pages, please. Alrighty, well, you have been Awoken with Aulden. Good night, everybody. Much love. Have a good, great rest of your week. Go Cats. Heck yeah. Not a great game yesterday evening, but hey, they'll rebound. All right. Good night, everybody. Much love.